Hi everyone, this is Tracee Garner. I am back for another episode of Write with Tracee. I want to talk to you today about outlining your book. So one of the things that is really important to note is that when you outline your book or when you think about, what the chapter is going to be, how are you going to tackle each one, and kind of what are you going to name them, some of the most important things that you should do first are to look at other books. I can't tell you how as a writer, and I really wasn't interested in these kinds of things when I first started writing. But as I evolved and started putting together my own books for indie publishing or self-publishing, as it's also called, those mean exactly the same things, just FYI. But for indie publishing sounds cooler. So for my own journey, I really wasn't interested in the interior and the appearance of the book, so much so that I didn't look at how books were designed, didn't look at what the little things, little details that people put inside the book. I mean, these are graphic designers. Some of them are wonderful and have really beautiful ways of putting together a book. And really, the delight is in the details that you don't think about, you don't look for. You're just interested in the interior and reading the book and what's happening on the page and in the text. That's all you really care about. But if you're going to be self-publishing or doing your own book or what have you, even if you're not, even if you get a traditional contract, you'll still want your book to have a specialness to it, a special zing, some features that other books might not have. Even if you look at books displayed on a table, some of them have interesting edges for the paper. All of those things, while wonderful and pretty and unique, can also drive up the cost of your book. But one of the things, getting back to my original point, was that I just love looking at different books, how they're set up, what's included in the content, chapters, and any little other things that I see that are visually stunning and visually appealing that you might not expect. A book that is currently on the shelves right now, I do not remember the name of it, but it's about a bookshop. It's probably called The Little Bookshop, and I just happened to flip through it one day while at the bookstore, and I saw that obviously because it's about a bookshop, there were little book icons, little book pictures, black and white, on each page. Kind of a stack of books. And I thought, well, that's cute. It is a book about a bookshop, but it could have not been there at all. It could have just been something, could have been something that, wasn't unique to the book at all. The illustrator or whoever book designer did that, didn't have to do that. But what was important is that it was black and white, and so it really didn't cost anything extra in order to produce that on the page. Now, if it was color, that book would be a lot more than whatever price it was. So those are some of the things that drive up costs about your book. You can still be and add little details and things that are fun for you, but you have to be cognizant of some of the limits you have because ink and paper and all of those pretty little details drive up costs. Today I'm going to be talking about doing some outlining for my book. I'm going to show you the outlines of a couple of different books that I chose because remember, one of the things I said in another video is that you want to pick a book that you want to emulate. You're not copying, you're not plagiarizing, but as far as look and feel goes, you want to make sure you use that in a way that is, you can emulate and you can draw from. You're only really using it to draw from. You're not using it to copy or to use whatever they did verbatim. And you also may have to find different ways, if you're not a designer, if you're not an illustrator or a graphics person, to insert those same little things. So, and you have to be careful about licensing and stuff. If you do find something that you really, really like, maybe someone who draws, or you could even recreate that on an iPad or any of those draw programs that people use to make little doodles and stuff. And so those things are really fun. But what I've done is I have broken my book up into 5 parts. I think that when you start writing a book, it is so big, seems ginormous to you. But if you really try to take more bite-sized pieces, you can, when you really try to break your book up into more manageable and bite-sized pieces, you can begin to show and begin to make progress on what you're doing and have something to show for. One of the things that people find, I think, that intimidates them about writing is that it is so big. It just seems like a huge undertaking, a huge project. But little by little, all of my books, I can never believe how much I have written, but I just know that 1,000 words, 200 words, a paragraph, and then a page, and then double space it. And sometimes I play little tricks with myself where I turn the type into Courier New font, and that just makes it seem like I've written way more than I have written. I have to turn it back, but it's a little trick and a little game to play with yourself if you feel like you're not getting anywhere. So there's lots of little things you can do to help give you a boost and make you feel more productive. But I've chosen to put my book into 5 sections, and a couple of the sections I already talked about in a previous video. That was the front matter and back matter. As you can see, the front matter and the back matter both have these different components, and some of them are duplicates, such as the about the author and the biographical note. Those seem like the same things. Those are not that different. So you have to decide what kinds of things that you want in your book, and you should make those decisions, kind of now, so that you can just get to writing. So the front matter will be the first part of the book, and I've actually written a couple of those already, working since January this year. That was my goal, and I wanted to think about, just moving forward with this nonfiction book that I've been kind of thinking about, not long, but at least a year almost. In July, it'll be a full year since I've really worked on this project and when it first started. So I dated my chart, my mind map, July 2019, and so that means that we're coming up on a year, and books do take years. It hasn't been necessarily a priority. I have written my other 2 books in fiction. Those are the ones that I'm focused on right now, but I still wanted to set some time aside to work on this nonfiction project. So the front matter will include things like my title page, my copyright page, other books that I have written. There'll be a list of that in there, as it is in all my books, so people can go and check them out. Table of contents, the acknowledgments, and I'm thinking about doing a foreword. I'm not sure who I would ask to do that, but I'm still, mulling that over. And then the introduction. I'm not saying that that is all that will be in the front matter, but those are the things that I've thought about and kind of capitalized on for right now. The second chunk is really the next part of just using the book and a kind of introduction for the reader about where we're going. So the second part of the book is how to use this book. Who is this book for, and why should you be reading this book? These are just some questions that I may take 2 or 3 pages to answer for the reader. I also may share, kind of what I was going through as the impetus for why this book is happening and why I decided to create it. And also just let the reader know they're in the right place if this is the subject matter that they want to know about and have been looking for. The next thing, number 3, is the core content. I will be using the core content, should be about maybe 60 to 75% of your book. So that is what you want to think about when you're writing. I'll be giving instruction basically for every single week on, what you should do in your work life in order to prepare for a transition. You all should know by now that we're talking about transition, or before the jump. That's the name of the book. And so you can look at other videos that I've created to see dig deeper into the subject matter and understand the impetus behind the book and why I decided to write it and what kind of things were happening. The fourth part of the book will be resources and suggested things that people do and some things that people can look further into. And even before I get to the back matter, it will have a reading guide or suggested further reading. So I may list at least, 10 to 12 books. I'll probably list more than that just to make it really robust in a full resource library, but list other books that I have read and books that I have heard about that are good for the subject matter, because that really enhances your ability to know what you're talking about, to come across as an expert, and to help others and empower them with further reading. Your book, as much as you want it to be the end all be all for everyone, for everything, that is sadly just not going to be the case. And people don't think like that. People don't read something and think, wow, I've learned everything there is to know about organizing my life in order to prepare for a career transition. No, people are voracious readers. They want to keep reading. They want to learn more. You never stop taking classes. You never stop learning. And so your book won't be the end all, but at least make it really good and really full so people can really feel like they've gotten a lot for their buck and also a lot for their time, and that the author knows what he or she is talking about. So those will be really important things. One of the things that will help you, I feel, as far as writing the main content of the book, which is number 3, the core content, which should be about 60 to 75% of the entire book, is to think about your chapters in 3 ways. So kind of like a mini outline for all the chapters. And what I will give you an example of is to start with almost like a thesis statement. One of the statements I have for one of my chapters is really the first chapter is kind of how the world is has some hiccup moments, some breakdown, some things that kind of scare us and make us a little crazy and almost panic inducing. And then how that was weighing on you, how that affected you, how that, you thought about that. I, as a person with a disability, constantly think about support systems and networks that I don't want to break down as a person aging with a disability. These things, and even people who don't have disabilities, think about, systems breaking down, things that you need not being available, especially when you don't have the money that you need set aside. And even if you do have all the money, if you need help, that money is not going to always be the best thing to help you. You may be able to pay a lot of people to come in, but who's really going to look out for you and be an advocate when funds and the money dries up, or if the money doesn't mean anything? I have had a lot of caregivers, and money isn't always a motivator for them. If the environment is not right, if it's not convenient to them, if it's not a place they can get to easily, those have been significant deterrents to working for various people with all kinds of disabilities and the elderly, just because they just don't want to do it. So money is not always an issue. What you need is a network coupled with funding to make all of the things that you need happen. And so I may start off each chapter with a kind of statement that really understands and drives home the point. The second thing is just to do a story or illustration. I made up a statement kind of for that's really timely and relevant right now. I hope that this statement is no longer relevant in the next few months because we need it to go away as soon as possible. But the statement is simply that coronavirus had paralyzed the world, and I was part of that very vulnerable population they kept talking about, that further induced my panic. So that's a very succinct statement. It might be a little muddled. I haven't edited it as much as I probably should, but it's just that you want to use the words that get people's attention. This is a very devastating event in our world. It's causing people to be all kinds of panicked. And then we have not even gotten into the economic impact. But my point is to use something in your book that grabs people's attention. So if you want to just take a moment to think about what would be some of the takeaways that I would expound on in this chapter. I've given you a statement, and so how are you going to then write more about the statement and kind of really use as many words as you can, so long as they're succinct and make sense, and then go into more detail. And I also gave a statement earlier about just having a disability and needing a caregiver and needing a support network. I could make a statement about those. And also that we're having a caregiver crisis. And these are the things that kind of make you really think about getting your ducks in a row and under making a plan for yourself, having an advance directive if you need. All of these things, kind of weigh on you. And the only thing you can really do is to take action and precautionary measures and to save in order to prevent these things from having a devastating impact on you and your family. So after the statement that I made, I would do a story or illustration. So that would take me further into the statement. I'd be able to expound on whatever the statement said, and I'd be able to also apply it to myself or to the reader, however you choose to do that, and really show them this is what's happening, this is what I'm going through, and this is what it's costing me, such as, mental health breakdown, or just stress, which causes a lot of heart issues and underlying disease and even just inflammation in your body. So those things you want to think about, not to induce panic among others, but hopefully at the end of your illustration or your story, you'll be able to talk about solving the issue, because that's the real thing. Nobody wants to read a book full of problems and to alert them about things they already know when they simply watch the evening news. But how are you going to arm them with the tools they need in order to solve their own problems? It's not really their own problem. It has been, come from something. At the same time, it is your own problem because you have to deal with it, and the cavalry is not necessarily coming. Yes, there are places you can go, but at the same time, are you going to get there? One of the things for this particular statement is to just list, here are the things that we know for sure. Here are what people have been doing to combat this. How can you take your own care and your own financial situation into your own hands to ensure that you have coverage, that you have a doctor that you can go and see, that you can call someone, and then something as simple and mundane as, how are you going to get somewhere? Once I have been sick and I had to call a cab, I could not drive myself. At the time, we didn't have a modified van that my caregiver could drive. And so since then, we've made plans to ensure that that never happens again. Not that someone couldn't come and get me, a cab company with a ramp. It was the length of time that it took, as opposed to just getting in your car and driving yourself, or having someone with an accessible vehicle drive you. So all of these logistics you'll be outlining for people, all of these contingency plans, and the goal is to arm people with information through a story or a personal thing or something that has really happened as a result. And then how do you solve it? So you could do this, you A, B, and C. I would say at least 3 practical ideas or solutions for each story, illustration, or each chapter, really. If the whole chapter is about the one statement, then maybe 3 to 5 is a lot, but they could be simple things, such as educating yourself, such as getting information, such as creating a emergency kit. Everybody remembers Y2K, and people stocked up on water and canned goods and non-perishables, but similar things happening with this also, toilet paper and paper towels. So come up with 3 to 5 ways to solve whatever the issue is in the story that you've used to illustrate the problem. The last thing, and this is really very optional, but I like it, at the same time, it can have a negative effect too, and that is to give people a summary or a list of bullet points. The only thing I would say that is bad about the list of bullet points or the summary is sometimes people will just read that. That can be both good and bad, in that people aren't really reading the entire book and they're just using it more as a reference. That could be great because it'll keep your book around for a very long time. Or people could also just feel like, well, I don't need to read the whole chapter or the rest of the book. Let me just see what the bullet points say, and then I'll have all the information and I'll be done, and there goes your book. So those bullets or summary points that at the end of each chapter will be something that is more of a personal preference for you and something that you can use. So all of these things hopefully will help you begin to really start to write the book and get into the nitty-gritty, which is that core content, the interior, after your introductions and your table of contents and your title page. You really want to get into the core. And if you follow these steps about the statement, the thesis statement or just the statement, the story or illustration, and then solve the issue with a couple of suggestions, takeaways, and then the bullet points and the summary. So even the takeaway, just start with what I learned in this situation is, and then expound on what you learned. The bullet points say, so remember, dot, 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 do this, and don't do this. Really succinct way to get your book down as you go to it every single time. Every time I open my Word document for my books, I see something that I can expound on, that I can write more about, and the book keeps getting longer and longer. And those are the things that you want to do. It can happen. You just have to stick with it and just be organized and really understand what you're doing and really what you have to share and to tell with everyone. So they can't read it unless you write it. That is it for this week. I will see you next time. And I thank you so much for joining me. Please tell a friend to subscribe and come join us, and Write the Book with Tracee continues. Have a great week and take care. In previous videos, I've mentioned that some of the books I wanted to use include 55 and Faking Normal, which is by Elizabeth White, who talks about, being unprepared in her later years for the bust of the market and the downturn and the recession. And so I love that book. It is set up exactly like I would love for my book to be. The second book I mentioned was Steve Harvey's Jump. It was more about the content of the book and the subject matter as it relates to my own subject matter. It wasn't necessarily about the book layout that I was looking at and what I liked. And then the third book that I recently added, because I have been looking for books that have ducks on them, because organizing or getting your ducks in a row is kind of the catchphrase for my book. I actually found that I owned all of these books by Regina Leeds. She has 1 year to an organized work life and also 1 year to an organized financial life. And then her third book, 1 year, I'm not sure if that is the order, but the third of one of her books is 1 year to an organized life. And I'm pretty sure that that one is the original book. And then the organized work life and the organized financial life came later. I'll share those covers here. Because the book had a time frame, 1 year, which is 52 weeks, I really started to hone in on my own idea that I would write my book in such a way where I gave people something to do towards their transition or their career change every single week. And I thought that that was an awesome idea. And that book has been here on my desk for years. So it's interesting that I kind of circle back to that, and you'll find something that resonates with you and that sticks out with you, and hopefully you'll be able to circle back to it too. So just keep looking around, go to see books that are, like yours, and also ones that have nothing to do with your subject matter, just to look at the layout, how it's going to look. One of the things that may be hard is that this book was originally going to be 10 to 12 chapters. And so even though 52 weeks for Miss Leeds' book they're very short, I will still have to come up with 52 things you have to do every week in order to meet your transition. Not that everything will take only a week, but there'll be things that you can start to set in motion, get the forms you need, get the programs, get the learning. And so those will be the way. You can do all of them or none of them, but it would be a really robust way to think about. The other thing is that I did find sometimes 52 weeks to be overwhelming. There was a lot of content with each chapter being about 2 pages. So that book is going to be doubly more than what I had originally thought it to be, but it is something to think about. So all of these things that you use to give you input and give you ideas are so important. And so you'll want to just look at everything you possibly can so that you will be that much more armed with information.